Okay, so this isn't the video that I originally wanted to make. This is definitely not what I had in mind for my first video on YouTube, but I feel like that's just something that I have to do. So today, I'm just gonna be sharing one of my many testimonies, and sharing what God's done for me, right? All the things that He's done in my life. Okay, so we're gonna go back in time a little bit. Right now we're in 2025. We're gonna go back to 2023, right? So just to put a little bit of context, 2022, me and my family first moved to Ottawa, right? And then I started to go into a new school, usual stuff, right? I had made a friend group at that point in time, but at the end of 10th grade, I kind of fell out, right? From that friend group due to drama happening between me and one other person in that friend group, right? So I kind of stray away from that friend group and decided to make some other friends, right? Keep in mind that at that time I was doing cadets, basically army training. I would go there once a week. We would stay. I had a couple of friends there because I had been doing that also starting in 2022, right? So I've been doing that consistently. I had my friends at school. I joined a new group of friends. I thought, okay, everything's great. Fast forward to January 2023, right? January 2023. I meet a certain guy at cadets, right? For this story, let's call him Jacob, right? So Jacob was a guy who used to vape back in the day, right? And that was my first encounter with anything like that in my life, right? So we lived in Toronto before we moved to Ottawa, and in Toronto, like I knew of stuff like weed, and obviously everybody knows about smoking cigarettes. Like I wasn't a child, right? But I had never been in an environment where I was exposed to it, right? But this kid, Jacob, he brought a vape to cadets, right? And then obviously he was with his group of friends, but his group of friends had two of my friends, right? So I went with them, and that was the first time in my life that anything went into my lungs that wasn't air, right? And from then on, I started doing it once a week. Every time I would go to cadets, I would meet up with these kids, and then we would vape in the bathrooms, like the average high school student in Ottawa. But besides the point, right? So we kept doing that, doing that, doing that, doing that. And then one day, this kid, Jacob, brought a vape that looks a little bit different, right? It's what we call a dabby. Basically, it's a vape pen with weed oil in it, which basically makes you high, right? So, again, first time having an encounter with actual drugs, right? So, this guy, he's smoking weed and he's just chilling in the bathroom, right? And obviously, I go to join him with a bunch of friends because it's like, okay, now we're about to vape like we used to, right? And then he's like, "Oh no, this ain't no vape, right?" So I'm like, "All right, you know what? Let me try it anyways, right? It can't be that bad." So suck on it, lungs are dead, right? But a couple of minutes later, my brain starts to tweak, right? Everything is going in slow mo. I start seeing colors that are not there. Um, I feel extremely relaxed. And that was my first time being high. It was unlike any feeling that I've had before. And honestly, at the time, I low key enjoyed the feeling, right? But I didn't know that that would be the start of the problem, right? So basically, we transitioned. We transitioned from vaping once a week to now smoking weed once a week. Right? And obviously it was a small window. Basically how cadets would go is we meet up, we have a parade, and then we separate for classes, right? And then we come together again for like a 20-minute break, and then we go back to class. And that 20-minute break is what we would use to go and smoke weed, right? Now that was cadets, right? And at the time, I kept my life in cadets and my regular life very much separate, right? Everything that I did in cadets, I did not do at school, at home, none of that, right? I was just at home and at school. I was just being a regular normal teenager, right? But then, like I said, remember, I had a falling out with my original friend group. So I started making friends with this other friend group. Now, this other friend group had two kids, right? And those two guys used to smoke together all the time. Let's call them Caden and Jalen, right? So Caden and Jalen used to smoke together all the freaking time. They would come to school high. They would leave school high. At lunchtime, they'd be high, right? And remember, I started smoking at cadets, so I thought, okay, let me also start smoking with them, right? Because we used to hang out, obviously, nothing crazy, but I thought, okay, whatever, let's just start doing it and then see how it goes, right? So I joined those two kids and we start smoking. And that's when it starts. Now I went from smoking once a week at cadets on Wednesday nights to smoking almost daily and going to class high on most days, right? And again, important to keep in mind, I went to school absolutely hammered, right? Especially the fourth period, because in my high school we had 3 periods and then lunch and then a fourth period. And at that time, my schedule was made so that all my hard classes were from the morning till lunch, and then after lunch I had art, right? So obviously I'd be chilling, I'd be enjoying, I'd be hanging out with friends because art is easy. Art is my subject. I love doing art. So to me, having art as my last period was the best option, right? But then when I started smoking at school, I started going to class completely high, right? And what that gave is a situation where I was so high in class that I started crying in the middle of class. It got that bad. Nobody knew what was happening besides one other dude that was in that class because he knew me because I used to do his artwork for him, right? So he knew me and he knew the second I walked into that class for the first time hammered, he knew, yo, why are you high? And that's exactly what he told me. He told me, why are you high? Why are you doing this? You're a good kid. Why are you doing this? Right? But at the time, obviously, I didn't really have a solid friend group. I was just going around and I just found those kids who would being high. And I got it in my mind, yo, being high, smoking weed, doing drugs was cool, right? So I kept doing it and doing it and doing it until one day. At that point, I was basically addicted, but not really addicted, right? I mean that in the sense of if there was weed around, you know for sure I was smoking it, but I wasn't addicted enough to go buy my own, right? But one day, lunchtime, as per usual, me and these two other kids, Caden and Jalen, we go out, right? Now, my school was at the top of a hill, and basically at the bottom of that hill was like a little shopping mart, right? You had a bunch of different restaurants, a Dollarama, a Metro, etc. Right? We took the bus, went down the hill, and then we went behind the Metro. We went there to meet another dude, right? Another dude who wasn't coming to school anymore, but who had weed, right? So we went there to meet him, and as we started to smoke there, right? There is the secretary, one of the secretaries from the school came down and caught us right in the act, right? Everybody was there. The blunt was going around, right? The second we saw her, dropped it, and then we just kept talking, right? And obviously she started talking to us. She's like, "What are you guys doing? Why are you guys here?" Right? And then we denied it, right? Nothing is happening. We're good. Blah 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 blah. And then she says, "Oh, I know exactly what's happening. You're telling me four dudes huddling behind a metro and nothing is happening? I was not born yesterday." Basically, what she told us, right? And then she left. She went back. At that point, I was stressing, right? I was saying, yo, maybe we should just go back to school and then go back to class, right? That way there's no issue with it. They were like, nah, it's good. She can't do anything. Even if she did catch us, like, it's off the school grounds. So it really does not matter what happens, right? So obviously, my dumb 15-year-old self thought, oh, cool, it's fine. Nothing bad is gonna happen. So we stay there, smoke, get high, go get food, and then go back to school. School's supposed to start at 1:45. We got to school at 2:30. School ends at 3, right? We got to school at 2:30. Obviously we gotta go to that secretary's office so that we can get a ticket, so that we can be accepted into class, right? So we go to her office, and instantly she calls the principal's office. She's like, yo, I got these 3 kids out here. Um, Clearly they've been doing something. I can't prove it, but they've been doing it, right? So principal comes in. At that point, my heart is beating, bro. I can't hear myself. I can't do anything because at that point I'm still high. I'm still high. The drugs had not dissipated yet. So I'm out here stressing out of my mind. Hands trembling, voice trembling, legs shaking. I could barely stand up, right? Principal happens. Principal comes in, separates us, right? We each give our own story, and then he puts us back together, right? So the stories are told, and then instantly calls our parents, right? So before he does that, I call my parents, and I'm like, listen, the school's about to call you. Obviously, I told the school a lie. I told them I wasn't smoking. I called my parents instantly, yo, the school's about to call you, and whatever they tell you, don't listen, right? So my dad obviously is apprehensive on the situation, but it's whatever. I go back home, everything's fine. The next day, the school then calls my parents, right? And then they're like, oh, we need to have a meeting with you because your son was doing X, Y, and Z. So my parents start pull up to the school, right? They pull up to the school. I'm sweating bullets, right? Because I'm still like froggy from yesterday's high. But you know what? It's fine. I'm sweating bullets, and I'm out here praying for my life that the school believed what I told them, right? And they did, partly, right? They did. So the secretary that was there, she's like, yo, I know that you're a good kid. I know you don't usually do this, and I don't think you were with them doing it, right? But you're guilty by association. You shouldn't have been there to begin with, right? So I'm still stressing. My parents go to the office. They're so angry. My mom comes out of it. We get in the car. First thing my mom asks, "Are you doing drugs?" Obviously, I'm lying out of my mind, right? So I told her, no, I'm not doing drugs. She doesn't believe me. We get home, go to the basement, and then we start talking, 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 talking. We talk. She gets mad. I got the beating of a lifetime. Honestly, it was deserved, but I got that beating. But like I said, I was addicted at that point. I could not stop smoking, right? So not more than a week later, I started smoking again. So every time I would go to cadets, I would still get high, even though I stopped doing it at school, right? And then at one point, I just got tired of it, but I couldn't stop, right? I got tired of it, but I physically could not stop. I would physically try every time. I'll try to get away from the friends. I'll try to stay more by myself. I'll try to like just mind my own business so that I'm not in a position where I would be around weed. But it would never happen every time. Every single time I would be around the same people, and then I would start smoking again. So eventually I made a prayer, right? I made a prayer to God. I'm like, yo, God, please help me, right? I can't do this by myself. I can't do this on my own, right? So I pray to God. I'm like, yo, please help me. I can't do it on my own. Help me become stronger. Help me stay away from all these bad addictions, etc., etc. And I make that prayer with my whole heart. I make that prayer with my whole being, right? And the next time that I'm around these friends, I'm I've convinced myself, yo, I'm not about to smoke weed this time. Regardless of what happens, I'm not smoking. So we get around, one of them pulls out a blunt. He's like, yo, y'all trying to smoke? I'm like, I'm not really trying to do that today, right? So he lights up the blunt and then starts smoking, right? Then he makes it go around. Then it gets to me, right? And then battle inside my head. I'm like, don't do that. You made the prayer, so you wouldn't have to, right? And then I tried smoking again because I was dumb. So I pulled on it. Nothing. Look, the blunt is off, right? So then I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm already halfway through it. Might as well go through with it. Ask the other dude to toss me his lighter, right? I start trying to light it up. Lighter wouldn't work for the world, right? And that's when I go back to my prayer. I realized that my prayer had been answered, right? I asked God to make sure that I never smoke again, regardless of the situation. And now I was in a situation where I was about to smoke, but he made it so that I physically couldn't, right? And that's the thing that saved me from smoking weed, right? It's been about 2 years, 2 maybe 3 years. This happened in end of 2022, beginning 2023, if I remember correctly. It's been 2 to 3 years. I haven't smoked ever again. I'm clean. So I want to thank God. Yeah, and this is all to say it is possible. Addiction isn't impossible to get over. And I'm a living testimony of that. All glory to Jesus Christ. Amen.